You are on the What I Never Saw channel. Enjoy watching.
I came home early that Thursday. No particular reason. Just one of those days where the office felt heavier than usual, where even the coffee tasted off. The meetings were short, and the workload lighter than expected. So I left before sunset, hoping maybe I'd get ahead of tomorrow. Maybe catch my wife off guard in a good way. I turned onto our street like I had 1,000 times before. Nothing unusual. The lawn was freshly mowed, her car was in the driveway, and the porch light hadn't come on yet. But as soon as I opened the front door, I knew something was wrong. You ever walk into your own house and immediately feel like a guest? Like someone had just been there, and you weren't supposed to know? That's what it felt like. There was this weight in the air. Not like tension exactly. More like residue. A lingering something that didn't belong. I couldn't explain it then. I still can't. But that instinct, that subtle shift in atmosphere, it was the first flag, even before I saw anything. The scent hit me next. Cologne. Sharp, expensive. Definitely not mine. I frowned and stepped further into the foyer. The house was unusually quiet, and for a second, I wondered if maybe Cassandra had gone for a run or was taking a nap. But then I saw them, the wine glasses. 2. Red wine. One still half full, the other with a faint lipstick stain around the rim. We didn't drink wine during the week. At least not unless something had happened. Something worth celebrating or unpacking. I picked up one glass and sniffed. Cabernet, I think. Definitely not the white she always reached for. Beside the glasses, a wine bottle sat sweating on a cork coaster. Half empty. Expensive label. And one we didn't own last week. That's when I saw the jacket. It was draped over the back of one of the dining chairs. Black, tailored, and clearly not mine. The material looked Italian, maybe we'll blend. I stepped toward it, hesitated. My hand hovered over the shoulder seam, fingers barely brushing the fabric. It was still warm. Someone had been here. Recently. I didn't hear footsteps or drawers, or the TV upstairs. Just the soft, deliberate hum of the bathroom fan. Then the door clicked open. She appeared at the top of the staircase like nothing was off. Cassandra. Hair wrapped in a towel. Robe tied tight. Calm. In control. Her face was smooth. Pleasant even. As she descended the steps, her expression saying nothing and everything at once. "Oh," she said with a blink, catching sight of me. "You're home early." I nodded, trying to keep my expression blank. "Yeah. Slow day. Thought I'd surprise you." She smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not the kind of guilty twitch you see in courtroom dramas. Just pleasant. Friendly. Exactly the smile a loving wife might give her husband on a random Thursday evening. That's what made it worse. I gestured at the table. "Company." Her eyes flicked toward the wine glasses, then the jacket, then back to me. All in a heartbeat. "Oh yeah, that." Her voice didn't waver. "Daniel came by. From next door. You know how he's been helping with the roof thing? He showed up with some packages and it started pouring." "The roof thing?" I echoed. I already knew what she was going to say. I just wanted to hear how she said it. She nodded, walking past me into the kitchen. "Yeah. The leak near the attic? I mentioned it last week. I was home, and he knocked, so I asked him to come in for a sec. Got soaked in the rain. I gave him a towel and poured a glass while he waited it out." Her back was to me now, busying herself with rinsing dishes that didn't need rinsing. She didn't glance back. Her posture was relaxed. Comfortable. Too comfortable. I followed her slowly, my footsteps deliberate. "Daniel, huh?" "Yep." She said it with a little laugh, like the whole thing was funny. Poor guy looked like a drowned rat. He didn't stay long. Just 15-20 minutes. We talked about shingles and weatherproofing. Riveting stuff. "You gave him red?" I asked. She turned, tilting her head. "It's what we had. You know I'm more of a white wine girl." "You said red gives you headaches." "Only certain reds," she said, waving it off. "This one was fine. Low tannins, apparently." She smiled again. Not too much. Just enough to suggest warmth. Closeness. Her robe slipped a bit at the collar, revealing her collarbone, and I noticed a faint mark near her shoulder. I didn't comment. Instead, I moved toward the jacket, lifting it gently. No wallet, no keys, but there was a receipt sticking out of the inside pocket. I didn't pull it out, just looked at her. She shrugged. Probably from his dry cleaning. Why? No reason. We stood there in silence for a moment. Her robe was damp around the edges, like she just stepped out of a hot shower. Not a quick rinse. A full soak. I looked at her hair. It was freshly wrapped, but not dripping. Not like she'd rushed. Did you shower after he left? I asked, keeping my tone even. Her eyes flicked to mine again. Yeah, I was cold. Rain came in through the back window a bit, so I cleaned up, figured I'd take a warm shower. Is that okay? There it was, the first flicker. A tiny edge creeping into her voice. Defensive. Not angry. Just slightly irritated. I smiled and shrugged. Of course. I moved past her, picked up my glass, the one she hadn't touched, and sipped. Still warm. No ice. No chill. Just room temperature red. I took a breath and nodded. Good wine. She smiled again. Glad you like it. I figured you wouldn't mind. I don't. I sat down at the table, staring at the chair across from me where the jacket had been. It was perfectly pulled out, like someone had just stood up from it a minute ago. The napkin near it was unfolded, but barely used. I should thank Daniel for being so neighborly, I said casually. She didn't blink. He was just being nice. I wouldn't make a big deal out of it. I'm not, and I wasn't. Not out loud, anyway. But inside, I was already writing everything down. Not on paper. Not in my phone. Just in my head, where the truth tends to live before it's ready to speak. Because I knew what I was seeing, what I was smelling, what I was feeling. A house that didn't smell like my home. A wine she never drank. A jacket I didn't own. A story too rehearsed, too smooth. And a woman who wasn't flustered by any of it. Not even a little. That night I didn't press further. I didn't accuse her. Didn't pull receipts or check timestamps. I sat beside her on the couch. Ate the takeout she ordered. Listened to her talk about the weather and her upcoming work trip. Nodded in the right places. Smiled when she looked over. And the entire time, I played the role she expected me to play. The loving, trusting, slightly oblivious husband. But inside I was wide awake. This wasn't the moment everything fell apart. It was the moment I started paying attention. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than usual, toothbrush in hand, barely moving. My reflection looked the same. Same short hair, same slight lines around the eyes, same steady hands. But something inside me had shifted. Last night hadn't just happened. It had settled. It's like when you lose your keys. You retrace your steps, thinking, no, I put them right there. But when they're finally found in a place you swear you never touched, your brain rewinds and starts stitching the clues together. You realize, no, actually, I did go into the bedroom after all. I did set my coat down. You start remembering things you swore you never forgot. That's how it felt the morning after the jacket. Like I'd found the beginning of a trail I didn't even know I was following. I couldn't shake the images, the wine, the jacket, her voice so smooth it could have been lifted from a movie script. None of it added up. Or rather, it did, but not in the way she wanted me to believe. And now I couldn't unsee the pattern. I stood in the kitchen pouring coffee when it hit me, her phone. A few weeks ago, we were having dinner and her phone buzzed on the table. Normally, she'd let it go. But this time, she dove for it like it was going to self-destruct. I'd made a joke. Something dumb like, CIA work? She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then she flipped the phone screen down and nudged it away from her like it had burned her hand. I shrugged it off at the time. One of those weird little things you forget because you're in love with the person doing it. But now, that moment rang in my head like an alarm I'd hit snooze on too many times. And then there was that Thursday a month ago. She was late getting home. I texted once, just a casual, "Everything okay?" She didn't respond until after 11. Claimed she'd been stuck on a conference call that ran long. Said she'd grabbed a drink with a coworker after to unwind. I didn't push back. But that night, she came home smelling faintly of hotel soap. Not the citrusy kind from our bathroom. The generic kind. Subtle. Easy to miss unless you leaned close. The signs weren't big neon flashes. They were small, scattered puzzle pieces I'd convinced myself didn't fit together. At least not until now. She started locking doors. That one really hit me. She used to leave the bathroom open when she showered. She'd call out to me from the steam, asking for a towel or just talking about her day. Sometimes I'd walk in, lean against the sink, and we'd chat while she rinsed her hair. But then she started locking it. I noticed it 2 weeks ago. I'd gone to knock, just to ask something stupid, like whether we needed eggs, and the door didn't budge. I waited. She came out 20 minutes later, towel wrapped tight, phone in hand, face flushed. I asked if she was okay. She said she just needed some space. Stressful day. That phrase kept coming up. Stressful day. It was her all-purpose bandage for everything lately. Coming home late. Stressful day. Needing to cancel dinner plans? Stressful week. Phone clutched in her hand even when she slept? Work's crazy. You know how it is. But that's just it. I did know how it was. I knew her job, her schedule, her coworkers. I knew her routine better than I knew my own. And it had changed. Not overnight. Slowly. Subtly. Like erosion. She used to leave her purse on the table, wide open. No secrets. Lately, it never left her side. She took it to the bathroom, to the patio, even just to grab laundry. Her phone, once left charging on the nightstand, was now always face down. Password changed. And her demeanor? Cassandra used to be soft in the mornings. That was always my favorite version of her. Half asleep, curled up under the covers, whispering jokes as the sunlight crept through the blinds. We'd lay there long after the alarm, pretending time didn't exist. But now, she was up before me most days. Already showered, already dressed, already sipping coffee. Her eyes moved fast, scanning headlines or tapping through emails like she couldn't afford to be still. She stopped asking about my dreams, stopped sharing hers. She flinched once. I remember this vividly. I reached for her shoulder from behind, meaning to kiss her neck. It was a habit of mine, nothing new. But when my fingers brushed her skin, she jerked forward, startled. She laughed it off, but her laugh was hollow, empty. "You scared me," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. I apologized, confused, but she was already halfway across the room. And that's when I started noticing the distance. Not physical. She still hugged me, still kissed me goodnight, but there was something gone behind her eyes. A spark missing, like she was going through the motions, ticking the boxes of a life she was no longer living inside of. I remembered the appointment. 2 Saturdays ago, she said she had a follow-up with a specialist. Something about blood work and results. She left around noon, came back after 4, holding nothing. No new prescriptions, no paperwork. Just a vague mention of everything being normal. She was wearing makeup I hadn't seen her apply. Hair curled just slightly, enough to look effortless. I didn't question it then. God, I didn't question anything. That's the part that made me sick. The way I just let it all go. Trusted her like it was muscle memory. Because for years, that's what it was. She'd say something and I'd believe it. She'd disappear for hours, and I'd assume it was traffic, a meeting, an errand. My mind never reached for the worst-case scenario, because I didn't want it to. I didn't want to live in that world. But now I was in that world. And all the things I'd once dismissed. The sudden desire to work out more, the new wardrobe additions, the way she triple-checked the calendar before agreeing to weekend plans. They all came back, loud and clear. There was a message once. Just a quick notification that popped up when her phone buzzed on the counter. I only caught a glimpse. The sender was just an initial, R. And the preview said, "Last night was." And then it vanished. She grabbed the phone like it was a grenade and turned her back. I asked who her was. "Client," she'd said. "Project guy. Annoying." I let it go, because that's what I did. But now I couldn't remember the last time I heard her mention that client again. No meetings, no calls, no updates. Just vanished. Like the message. And I remembered something else too. About a month ago, we were watching a movie together. She got up halfway through, said she needed to check on a work email. I heard her in the kitchen, talking low, almost whispering. I muted the TV. Her voice dipped even lower. Caught one word. Soon. Just that. And then the sound of her pacing, the microwave door opening, her pretending like she'd been reheating dinner the whole time. It wasn't the lies that hurt. It was the effort she put into them. Because effort meant investment. Investment meant choice. And choice meant betrayal. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That was the strange thing. I felt detached. Like I was watching someone else's life unravel from a distance. Like I was the narrator of a story I hadn't realized I'd been living inside. But I wasn't blind anymore. Something was happening. Something real. Something she didn't want me to see. And I was done pretending not to. That evening, while she laughed softly at a video on her phone, screen tilted away from me, I nodded along. I smiled when she showed me her dinner plans for the week. I kissed her goodnight. And as I lay in bed beside her, listening to her soft, rhythmic breathing, I made myself a silent promise. This wasn't the end of the trail. Not yet, but I had just found my footing. That night, after Cassandra fell asleep, I sat on the edge of our bed for a long time. The room was dark except for the dim blue glow from the digital clock. 12:47 a.m. Her breathing was slow, steady, peaceful even. I watched her chest rise and fall beneath the comforter. I used to find comfort in that sound. Now it felt like background noise to something I hadn't dared name out loud yet. I slipped out of bed quietly, avoiding the creaky floorboard near the dresser. My phone was already in my hand. I didn't even realize I'd grabbed it. I walked to the hallway, sat down on the stairs, and opened the folder I'd been keeping in my cloud storage. A folder that, until now, had been empty. A digital place I'd created just in case. Tonight, it wouldn't be empty anymore. I had downloaded a device syncing app months ago, back when I upgraded my phone and needed to transfer my texts. But I'd since discovered it could do much more than that. It was discreet, quiet. It left no app icon, no notification. As long as you had a few minutes alone with a phone and knew the screen passcode, it did the rest. And I did know the passcode. She'd changed it recently, but only once. For digits. Our wedding anniversary. Of course she thought I wouldn't guess it. Maybe she thought I wasn't paying attention anymore. Or maybe she didn't care. I crept back into the bedroom and found her phone resting on the nightstand. Face down. Silent. I glanced at her. Still asleep. I picked it up. Unlocked it on the first try. The app installed in less than 30 seconds. I returned it to exactly where I found it, careful not to adjust the angle. I backed away like I was defusing a bomb. In a way, I was. Downstairs, I waited, watching the syncing interface load. Her phone had thousands of messages. Photos, notes, emails. And there he was. His full name Rob G. Not a client. Not someone from work. A man she had met, it seemed, through a mutual friend from a gallery opening 6 months ago. The text started off innocently, jokes about modern art, shared playlists, favorite coffee shops. But it changed quickly. Within a few weeks, they were meeting up outside of those events. Hidden lunches, midweek coffees, deleted call logs. But nothing was really deleted, not anymore. Not from my screen. Then came the hotel bookings. There were messages with room numbers, playful banter about who would sneak out first, inside jokes about how Cassandra would bring work documents to justify overnight stays. She even teased him once. "You're my little layover secret. He has no idea. I could be in Tokyo for all he knows." I stared at that one for a long time. She never even liked traveling. But she used the metaphor to describe how easily she could vanish from our life, drift into someone else's bed, and return with a smile like nothing happened. There were photos too. Some of her. Some of them together. Nothing explicit, but suggestive enough to erase any doubt. One showed her sitting on a hotel windowsill, wrapped in a blanket, hair still damp, holding a glass of wine. Another had Rob's hand visible, resting on her leg. She'd sent it with the caption, "Might stay late at the office again next week." You make these fake meetings hard to quit. I couldn't feel my hands after a while. My fingers had gone numb. Not from cold. From something else, shock maybe. Or the slow realization that the person I loved most in the world had been living another life just outside the frame of ours. I read on. There were references to me, scattered through their conversations. Not always cruel, just careless. Like I was a logistical obstacle. He's working late all week, so we're good to meet Thursday. I'll say I'm prepping a Q4 brief. He still thinks I'm seeing a specialist. He offered to drive me last time. No need to worry. He trusts me completely. That one hit like a punch to the ribs. Not because it was mocking, but because it was true. I did trust her completely. Or I had. The worst part wasn't what they were doing. It was how easily they were doing it. How ordinary the cheating had become. Like a hobby. There were no signs of hesitation in the texts. No talk of guilt. No struggle with morality. She wasn't torn between two people. She was perfectly balanced between two lives. One of the last messages read, "He brought me coffee this morning like nothing's wrong. Sometimes I feel bad. But mostly I feel lucky." I read it 3 times. Then I closed the app. I didn't throw the phone. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just sat there. In silence. I'd always wondered what it would feel like. Real confirmation. Not a hunch. Not a suspicion. But absolute, undeniable proof. Turns out it feels like nothing. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just stillness. A heavy, cold kind of stillness. Like standing in the snow with no coat. Aware of the cold, but too numb to shiver. I shut my laptop and walked to the kitchen. Made coffee. Poured it into the same mug she'd given me last Christmas. The one that said, "Forever starts now." I watched the steam rise as the sun began to crawl up the edges of the blinds. Cassandra came downstairs an hour later, dressed in a navy blouse I hadn't seen before. Hair perfect. Earrings on. She smiled like it was any other morning. "Morning," she said, pouring herself a cup. I kissed her cheek. "Morning." She sat across from me, sipping quietly, scrolling through her phone. I knew what was in it. I knew what she'd just sent. I knew what she had scheduled for later that afternoon. A meeting at the Avalon Hotel. Room 429. She had even joked in a message. "He thinks I'm meeting with investors. Guess I'm investing in something else tonight." I stirred my coffee and smiled at her across the table. "How was your sleep?" I asked. She nodded, mid-scroll. "Fine. You?" "Didn't sleep much." She looked up. "Everything okay?" I held her gaze for a moment. The silence stretched. Then I smiled again. "Just thinking." She shrugged and went back to her phone. I didn't confront her that morning. Or the next. I let it sit. Let it breathe. Because now I had more than suspicion. I had facts. Dates. Names. **TS. And something else too, clarity. This wasn't about catching her in the act. It was about what I'd do next. She thought the lie had worked. That her script had held. That I was still in the role of the trusting husband. But what she didn't know was that the audience had changed. I wasn't watching the story anymore. I was writing the next act. And she was still playing her part in a play that had already been canceled. From that morning on, I made a choice. I would give her nothing. No tension. No cold shoulders. No prying questions or pointed glances. I wouldn't sabotage her story. Wouldn't poke holes in her lies. That would have been easy. Maybe even satisfying in the short term. But I wasn't playing for a reaction anymore. I was playing for position. And silence gave me the high ground. Cassandra kept moving through our life like nothing had changed. She had no reason not to. I didn't give her one. I woke up when she did. Made her coffee just the way she liked it. Oat milk, 2 stevia, cinnamon on top. I complimented her outfits. I packed her lunch twice that week. She even texted me mid-afternoon one day with a surprised "thank you" smiley face. Like it was the sweetest thing in the world. She thought the threat had passed. In her mind, whatever suspicion I might have had about the wine glasses or the jacket had been smoothed over, buried beneath my quiet gestures. She interpreted my calm as forgiveness. Mistake number 1. The version of me she thought she was fooling no longer existed. I had led that man sometime between the third hotel message and the photo of her lying beside Rob, smiling like a woman on vacation. That Simon, the one who believed in shared calendars and unspoken trust, he was gone. The one who replaced him, he took notes. Meticulously, I started keeping a private log. Every detail, times she left the house, what she wore, excuses she gave, who she said she was with, where she claimed she was going. I cross-referenced it with her synced messages, GPS data from her phone, and hotel check-ins I pulled from their email exchanges. By the end of the first week, I had a timeline. Not a suspicion, not a hunch, a documented chain of deception, mapped out like clockwork. She had a pattern. Tuesdays were usually strategy meetings that ran late. Thursdays were client dinners. Every second Friday of the month, she claimed she was flying to corporate for executive briefings, even though her office didn't require travel. Each lie had a rhythm, and once I stopped reacting emotionally, I could see it for what it was, a blueprint, an operating system, and once you know how a system runs, you can begin to control it. That's when things began to shift. I didn't try to stop her plans. I encouraged them, offered to drive her when she mentioned dinner with the board, volunteered to take care of things at home so she could focus. I left sticky notes with sweet messages on her windshield. I made her believe she still had me under the same spell. She smiled differently those days. The kind of smile you give someone who's almost too easy to deceive. There was an edge of pity in it. She thought she was protecting me, that I was the fragile one, the fool. But what she didn't know was that I was studying her. And every performance she gave me just sharpened my understanding of how to dismantle it. I began collecting more than texts and locations. I gathered receipts, watched for hotel confirmation emails. I even found a shared Google Drive folder where she and Rob dumped photos and itinerary notes. They thought they were clever, using file names like invoice_draft or client_notes. But metadata doesn't lie. A photo taken in room 614, timestamped for 3:17 p.m. right when she said she was leading a product demo downtown. Another of them at a vineyard, labeled Q3 Retreat. Her arms around his neck, sunlight in her hair, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in over a year. I downloaded everything, tagged it, dated it, stored it redundantly on encrypted drives, one in the safe, one offsite. This wasn't revenge. This was insurance. One afternoon, while she was out for team training, I visited a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a friend of a friend. Discreet, sharp, the kind who didn't ask too many personal questions until he saw the folder I dropped in front of him. "This is a lot," he said, eyebrows raised. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He flipped through the pages. *TS. Hotel records. Her own words. "This is enough," he said finally. "Maybe more than enough. I want this clean," I told him. "I want it to be quiet. But I also want control." "You'll have it." When I left his office, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, but focused. I went home that night and made dinner. Her favorite, basil pesto gnocchi with Parmesan crisps. I lit candles, played jazz. When she walked through the door, she looked surprised. "What's all this?" she asked, setting her purse down slowly. "Just thought we deserved a nice night in," I said, smiling. She smiled back, but I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Uncertainty. That was new. Mistake number 2. That night, she leaned into me in bed, curling against my chest like she hadn't done in weeks. Her fingers traced my arm absent-mindedly. I closed my eyes and matched her rhythm, steady as stone. In the dark, I listened to her breathing slow. And then I reached under my pillow and made a note in my phone. Observed. Increased physical affection after confrontation event plus romantic meal. Likely emotional rebalancing. False security reinforced. By now, I had trained myself not to flinch. I became what she needed me to be. Steady, simple, safe. And behind that mask, I tracked everything. Mistake number 3 came a few days later. She left her laptop open in the kitchen while making tea. Normally, she closed it religiously, but this time she must have felt comfortable. Or just lazy. Either way, the screen was active, and her email inbox sat open. She was facing the stove, her back turned. I walked past slowly, saw the subject line bolded in the middle of her screen. Fun at the lake this weekend? I saw Rob's name underneath, and part of his reply, wouldn't trade it for anything. You feel like home, Cass? Cass. My stomach tightened, but not from hurt, from confirmation. Even his nickname for her was borrowed from my private world. I called her Cass for years. He just inherited it like she had franchised her identity. I stepped into the hallway, took a photo of the screen, left her laptop untouched. That weekend, she said she was going on a girls' spa trip. Left early Saturday. Texted me selfies with smiling friends and mimosas. Friends I later confirmed hadn't seen her in months. I didn't respond to the texts. Instead, I took a different route. I booked a room at a hotel across the city. Checked in under a different name. Sat in the room with nothing but a notebook, a hard drive, and silence. I didn't text her. Didn't call. I let the house be empty. And when she came back Sunday evening, she looked shaken. The living room was spotless, but dark. No music. No scent of dinner. No warmth. She called out my name. I didn't answer. She checked her phone. Texted me, "Where are you?" I waited 30 minutes before responding. Just needed air. She tried to call. I ignored it. She left the porch light on all night. The next morning, she made pancakes, set the table, lit a candle, wore my favorite sweater. She kissed my cheek when I walked in from the garage. "How was your weekend?" she asked carefully. I paused, met her eyes, held them. "Quiet," I said, and she smiled with relief. But I saw it. The crack. The mask slipped for a second. Just long enough for her to realize something had shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't accusing. I was absent. Emotionally. And for the first time in months, she was the one chasing. I made a note. Observed. Subject entering containment phase. Beginning to anticipate consequences. No confrontation. Just silence. Let it work. Because silence is a funny thing. You think it's mercy, but sometimes it's just the sound of power changing hands. It started small, one line, dropped into a conversation like an accident. We were at dinner with friends, a couple we'd known for years, Ben and Talia. The 4 of us had done everything together, trips, game nights, holidays. If anyone had a sense of what Cassandra and I looked like as a couple, it was them. The night had been normal, safe. Wine, pasta, mild gossip about office politics and neighborhood remodeling. Then Ben brought up a funny story. Something about his coworker whose wife found an unfamiliar receipt in his glove box and lost her mind. Everyone laughed. Even Cassandra, though her laugh sounded a beat too loud, a touch too controlled. That's when I dropped it. I said, cutting into my steak. We've all had a few of those moments, right? Catching something that makes you wonder. A scent, a name in a text, a change in routine. Most of it's probably nothing. But sometimes, I let it hang. Cassandra's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Talia smiled politely. "Oh yeah, those classic overthinking spirals." I nodded. Sure. Except occasionally, overthinking is just delayed pattern recognition. I took a sip of wine. Ben snorted. "Damn, that's deep. You reading psychology books now?" "Nah," I said, smiling. "Just paying attention." I didn't look at her as I said it. Didn't need to. I felt the shift, the subtle catch in her breath, the stillness in her hands. Her laughter after that was thinner, stretched like old elastic. The kind of laugh someone practices in the mirror when they're unsure of the punchline. That was the first ripple. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even a threat. It was a seed. And over the next few days, I watched it grow. She started asking questions she hadn't before. "When did you say your meeting ends tomorrow? Are you going to be home for lunch? What time will you be back from the store?" Each question was wrapped in casual tone, but her eyes never matched the ease in her voice. She was monitoring, and I was giving her nothing. I answered kindly, consistently, but never with specifics. If I said I was going out, I went. If I said I'd be home, I was. But the where and the why, I let those parts stay vague. Let her imagination fill in the blanks. I gave her the gift of uncertainty. The silence hadn't cracked her, but the not knowing, that began to dig under her skin. She started staying home more often, rearranging plans. I'm thinking I'll skip dinner with the girls. Do you mind if we stay in this weekend? We haven't had time together lately. I agreed to all of it. I was affectionate, attentive, present, but I didn't let her lead. I didn't chase her across the room with glances. I didn't lean in first when we sat together. I didn't initiate touch unless she did. I let her feel the difference between me showing up and me reaching. Confused her. One night, I found her in the kitchen staring out the window, her phone in her hand, untouched. You okay? I asked. She turned, startled. Yeah, just tired. I nodded, then walked past her and kissed her on the temple. Early night, then. She stood there for a while longer. Just stood. The next day, I got a calendar invite from her personal email. Cassandra has invited you. Napa weekend, couples reconnect. There was no subject line in the body. No explanation. Just the invitation, as if she wanted to declare effort without admitting the motive. I accepted it. Of course I did. Let her try to reconnect with the man she no longer really knew. Let her feel what it was like to work for it. A few nights later, we had another dinner, just us. I chose a quiet spot, dimly lit, the kind of place that makes you lean forward to talk. She wore a dress I hadn't seen in months. Lipstick that matched the wine she ordered. You've been different lately, she said over dessert. I raised an eyebrow. Different how? I don't know, she said, eyes scanning me like she was looking for answers in my collarbone. You're just calmer. I smiled. Isn't that a good thing? I guess. She stirred her coffee slowly. I think we've both been under a lot of pressure, she said. I let her speak. I've just been distracted. Work's been chaotic. Things have been weird between us. But I want to fix that. I reached across the table, took her hand. I'm right here, I said. You don't have to convince me. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. That night, she curled up against me like she used to, tightly, as if proximity could erase memory. I let her fall asleep that way. Then I slipped out of bed and made another note. Subject: initiated emotional reconnection. Indicators of stress: delayed blinking, shallow breath, nonverbal check-ins. Monitoring for narrative resets. The next morning, I brought her breakfast in bed. Pancakes, strawberries, her favorite mug. She cried. Just a little. Silent tears she wiped away like they were allergies. She didn't mention them and I didn't ask. The cracks were widening. The performance was slipping, not just for me, but for herself. She started apologizing for things she never used to notice. I forgot to run the dishwasher, sorry. I didn't mean to leave the laundry in so long. Sorry I've been distant lately. I've just been in my head. She'd never apologized for her distance before. That was new. That was her telling on herself without realizing it. Guilt makes people narrate their own behavior, especially when they sense the balance of power shifting. And that's exactly what was happening. She had gone from feeling invincible to uncertain. From certain I was oblivious to unsure of what I knew. And still I gave her nothing. Not a question. Not an accusation. Just kindness, space, structure. And beneath it all, a quiet unraveling. One morning, I set her phone on the table screen up while she was showering. A text preview lit up from Rob. Can't wait to see you Thursday. Rooms booked. Same place. I didn't open it. I didn't take a **T. I just left the phone exactly where it was. When she came down, she froze. Eyes locked on the glowing screen. The air in the room shifted. I looked up from the paper like I hadn't noticed. You left your phone up here, I said casually. Oh, she said. Her voice was a little too quick. Thanks. She grabbed it, locked it, slipped it into her pocket. She didn't meet my eyes. Later that day, she asked if I wanted to go to dinner Thursday. Actually, I said, I've got plans. I was invited to a networking mixer. Oh, she said. Okay. That night, she stayed up late. I heard her footsteps pacing the bedroom. I didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't tell me. The next morning, she asked if I'd mind her skipping her client dinner. Of course not, I said, smiling. Take the night for yourself. Her eyes searched mine, like she was trying to find an answer I wasn't giving. She stayed home that night, ordered takeout, watched TV on the couch like a woman on house arrest. She didn't touch her phone. She kept looking at me like she was trying to find a version of me she recognized. But the man she was looking for wasn't there anymore. I had become a mirror, and she had started to see herself in it.